Okay, this is looking promising. Something's loading. And oh, more people are here as well, so I'll admit those as well. Got it. All right, we are here and we are ready. So hello and welcome to everyone. Oop, something's happening in the background. No. As you can tell, live streaming is perking. All right, retry. Welcome everyone. Sorry about that. Technical glitches. But yeah, welcome. Great to see your faces. And yeah, great that you guys are turning your videos on as well. We want to make this as engaging as possible. So we are here today on to how to win climate tech grants. And this is being positioned by Helena Merrick from Streamline, who I'll introduce in just a second. And quick bio about what Forward VC is. I think a lot of you might already be part of our community, but we are trying to build the ultimate climate tech ecosystem. And so we're catalyzing collaboration and funding in the climate ecosystem to enable positive climate impact at a previously unimaginable scale. So we're very excited about building a community of over 13,000 folks so far. And yeah, having some great resources and partners like Streamline to really help the community get to climate positive. So without further ado, I will hand this over to Helena, and feel free to kick things off.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here. Cool that so many people are interested in grants. It's hard to pass up on what a lot of people call free money. I do want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you're in a place where you can turn on your video, like please do turn it on. I think grants is something that ends up, there's like a lot of general advice I'll go through in like the first 15 minutes. But I think the bulk of what will be valuable is if you have the chance to talk about your companies and tell me about the specific grants you're going after, and then we can kind of engage on that. So if you're able to, please do turn on your video and let's make this interactive. I think everyone would benefit from anybody else's questions as well. So plenty of time for questions, but also feel free to like raise your hand and ask me anything. I originally was going to just talk about generic grant 101 advice. Then I realized that there's like 1,000 resources about that online, and I'm going to sound like a broken record. So knowing that you all are working on companies in the climate space, and I'm assuming pretty much all founders or like early stage operators, I wanted to basically leave you with something that like you can use actionably after, which is kind of walking through how you'd use something like ChatGPT or generative AI in your grant writing in a way that's like safe and secure. And I'm jumping the gun a bit. Before that, quick background, I'm Helena, one of the founders of Streamline. We built that into a product. I'm not going to talk about Streamline today, more about like how you can make yourself like almost like a superhuman in the grant writing process, and navigate some landmines. But I'm gonna have some slides, but again, most of this, ideally, we're just making interactive with a bunch of questions. Cool. I'm gonna share my screen. Cool. Can you see this all right? Yay. Okay, cool. So how to win grants with AI and LLMs. In talking through this, I will go through high level, like regular grant writing stuff. And you'll notice that it's pretty much the same as you would do normally, except you can do it faster. So as founders, you want to be resourceful, use everything out there, but do it in a safe way. And I'll touch on what is safe and what is not, and how you can think about protecting your IP as well, because I know that's top of mind for a lot of people. So I'll go through my background, the risks of using LLMs, prompt engineering tricks, which is just the term for how you can phrase what you're sending into something like ChatGPT or Claude or any other language model to get the response that you're looking for. And then I'll mention what Streamline is, and then we'll do mostly questions. Cool. About me, I'm the founder of Streamline. This is my second venture-backed company. Before this, I was in the video chat space, built a company, went through YC, and I'm very familiar with going through an Accelerator. Didn't go through Forward, but their community is awesome. So if you don't know about them, you should check them out. And my background before jumping into climate was mostly on the software side. So spent a lot of time after my first company just diving into how could we use software to enable other workflows? So been kind of obsessed with productivity, and talked to hundreds of founders, and grants was something that like came up over and over and over again. And through that have learned a lot about common pitfalls. But you shouldn't look at me or Streamline like your like grant guru, more that I've seen so many mistakes and I can tell you what mistakes not to make. But if you're looking for like an end-to-end consultancy or support system, I would look at, agencies like Climate Finance Solutions, or like other experts in the space. But I can definitely tell you what not to do. Awesome. Cool. So the first thing I want to touch on is like the risks of using AI for grant writing. I'm sure you've heard all sorts of things about, putting things in ChatGPT and that then getting used for training their models. And then some fifth grader is gonna, try to do their science assignment and see your IP. That is terrifying. And I would be worried about using ChatGPT with your IP. I would not put anything that you don't want on the internet into ChatGPT. If you're being cautious, like, yeah, just draw that line. That said, tools that use language models aren't necessarily using the same like data privacy standards. So I would, whatever tool you're using that's doing some kind of AI or generative information, I would look for things like, what are they doing with your data? Are they training models with it? And what are the base models underneath? Are they running their own? Are they, using your data to train their model? Basically, like those are the things you want to look for. The second thing, so it's on like the security side. The second thing is on the accuracy side. So I'm sure you've kind of played with ChatGPT and noticed it makes things up. And the reason it's doing this becomes obvious if you start to unpack like why, like how language models work. At their core, it's a predictive like model, which means it's been like trained on like the human history of everything that's online, and it can pattern match. So if the next word in my sentence is most likely A or B, it will respond with A. So the place this comes up a lot if you're looking at like scientific literature is like, if you're asking it to give you sources or create like a URL, it will quite literally make up a new website URL that looks like the format of another website URL, because it's trained on like pattern matching. So this is why I say kind of language models are quite dumb. They don't have a way of associating things. They're not thinking strategically. They know how to like word complete and they know how to pattern match. So if you're using something out of the box like ChatGPT, I would be careful for that. I would use it almost as like a brainstorming buddy, or a way to get past the blank space, like the blank page kind of worries of starting a grant, but never use anything out of the box without like properly reviewing it, which you'd want to do anyway if you hire like a grant writer or an intern or anybody to help you, but treat it like, maybe like an Ivy League intern. That's like, that definitely needs supervision. That doesn't mean it can't help you and help you make you faster. Just know that there's a lot of checks to make. Before I move on, are there other questions or concerns that people are worried about when they think of using like AI with their data or their experiences using ChatGPT?
I have a quick question, actually, playing
Yeah.
devil's advocate. So I guess one is about security and making sure that there's no risks involved. But have we encountered yet how this kind of can backfire? Have there been examples, yes, where this has backfired?
Oh, so many. Like, I think there's even been court cases, not specific to grant writing, but where the transcript or something that was submitted literally had in it, as a large language model, I cannot respond to this thing, right? Like they hadn't even reviewed it, and that statement was in there. And we're seeing that also in certain like research papers and other patents, and it's like kind of amusing, but also kind of terrifying. So in terms of like ramifications of that, I don't know if there were actual consequences. I think the stance of both grant reviewers, and if you're looking at another kind of vertical is like content marketing, if you're writing like blog posts with generative AI, like does Google care? Is it going to ruin your SEO? the answer that Google gave was, no, we care about the quality of the writing, right? If the quality is good, it doesn't matter. We don't care who made it. Ghostwriters have been around forever as well, right? So as long as the quality is like truthful and good quality, it doesn't really matter like how you kind of got to the output. Go ahead, Lucas.
Oh yeah, thanks. My question was kind of related on the grant evaluator side. Like as far as your experience goes, do you think like they could be excluding proposals based on like if they detect the use of generative AI, or that's something that won't happen? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely something we were worried about. But now we've talked to a lot of people on the reviewing side that are decently high up. For New York Climate Week, we hosted a panel with Douglas Schultz, who's like the COO of OSED, which is a part of the DOE, and he was so excited. And that kind of kept happening with everybody we met and have talked to thus far. It ends up being very similar. It's like if the quality is good, they don't seem to care, which makes sense, right? Like they want to be able to evaluate high quality projects. And one thing I'm going to touch on as well is like they're people. They're trying to help get you funded. And I think that's worth stating. A lot of the time, founders on like the private side look at government as this like scary behemoth, but they're just trying to like save the planet too. And if there's tools that help you navigate the messy process faster, they're so in favor of that. Like they don't want a convoluted, hard to navigate grant system. It just happens to be the case. And they're looking for ways of like supporting founders to kind of navigate that process. And there's all sorts of new programs coming up, and I can share some resources after this call. But one of them is like they have budgets that help first-time grant applicants hire grant consultants. Like they will give you money to apply because they know how messy the system is. And I hear that and I go crazy because that just seems like the most inefficient way of solving the problem. But know that they're trying, and they're gonna definitely be in your side to like help you get through the system.
We have a quick question also in the chat from Parastu. Is it possible to delete the conversation / text later from ChatGPT, for example, and would the data be still saved regardless of it being deleted after?
Here it depends on the system. So ChatGPT free version, you deleting it doesn't delete it anywhere but in your like web interface. Yeah, and I don't know exactly what the data privacy rules are for every other system, but I would definitely check. For EU grants, definitely still useful. Yeah, it's all a mess. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, it sounds like you said it's real messy. As far as I thought, these GPT programs were for proofreading, so that it can basically make context proper. But then and then again, when you were talking about how it relates and or recognizes patterns, is it not sometimes plagiarizing or taking things that it understands from another grant or another tech to go through and make yours, the one you're writing up, sound better? And doesn't that get kind of maybe in the lines of infringement? Or I don't know, that's what it sounds like. I kind of thought about the GPT, but I don't quite understand it quite well yet. And from what I've heard so far that they're coming up, everybody's scared of it taking over your lives,
Yeah, so the part that would take over your lives is what's referred to as artificial general intelligence, AGI. And anyone I've talked to that's actually working in this space thinks it's very far away. That said, we should be investing more in AI safety, but I wouldn't be scared of language models in the same way as like a general intelligence. In terms of your earlier question around plagiarism versus not, I'd say like most writing and like scientific innovation comes from combining past research. Like if you're looking at what you're doing as a human, like you're reading resources you're finding quotes that support what you're working on, you pull them in, you do your own like research, but like you're not like nothing is net new. Even if like you think it is, like you are using word patterns that others have used in the past. Of course, like if it's straight up copy pasting from somewhere else, then that's definitely plagiarism. But ChatGPT itself is actually not that good at citing sources. It is kind of, again, just like a predictive word model. So that's, I guess, like at a high level, but you should always, of course, double check and like do your own like proofreading of it.
Well, I just one little thing here. I have an issue with English because it's not my first language. And when I write, I mean, it tends to be not according to the established, well, I guess the new English speaking, because I already got a bad grade in technical writing. And I kind of put the class on a different curve as far as grading was concerned, because I have an articulation that would allow the instructor or to be considered a proper English person or American or whatever. But because of the language that I started with is totally opposite of what English is. It's still in my, the instructor said it's in the back of my head. So it's not like I have a problem. It's just that it becomes an issue when I write because I can't recognize it. And nobody can proofread themselves. So does that happen? I mean, does that take care of that?
I'm stepping in real quick because Helena has got a lot of information to share, and I'm sure and in terms of addressing your concerns, feel free to reach out to her or through the link also, and she can refer to that afterwards also, because Helena has more than just ChatGPT knowledge, so I want to make sure that she's got the bandwidth to cover all of that, if that's all right.
Sorry.
No
You're totally
worries.
good, John. At a high level, you're actually describing a really good use case for ChatGPT for proofreading. So you're on the right track. Cool. The next thing I kind of want to touch on is a few things around just high level, what makes a good grant, or how to avoid some of those pitfalls I was talking about before. The number one thing is to ensure you actually are in scope for the program. And this sounds obvious, but it's not. It's one of two top reasons people get rejected from grants. One of them is formatting, right? The fact that you maybe don't have the right spacing, or you have too many words, and that's a really silly reason to get all of your work flushed down the toilet. The second is that you're not a right fit, and by fit, what I mean is that it's not what the grant was intended for. You'll notice that funding opportunity announcements, or FOAs, are very explicit in what they're looking for. If they're talking about recycling and then they define exactly what type of recycling they want, don't apply with your reuse tool or your circular economy product, because you will not win. Even if you think you can kind of bend it and twist it, none of the applications where you have to bend and twist what you're working on will ever get greenlit unless you somehow fall through their cracks. But know that there's a lot of people applying that are a perfect fit, and those are the ones they're going to select. So be super protective of your time, and only apply to things that are they feel like they're calling your name, basically. The second, again, sounds obvious. You need to know your audience well when you're writing, and this is something where ChatGPT kind of falls short, right? It's very just generic language model, and if you tell it, hey, answer this question, describe my team and why they're going to win. Why they're going to build the best direct air capture plant. They don't know who's reviewing that, or they, I'm anthropomorphizing ChatGPT here, but the language model doesn't know who's reviewing this grant. They don't know the policy history of the Inflation Reduction Act, and they don't know who the grant writer is reporting to, right? So you need to kind of embed all of the knowledge that you have in your head about the policy history of the solicitation into your prompts. And I'll walk through what that means in a second. But as you're writing, always think about what they're looking for, how they're reviewing it, and what they want in the application. The last one, follow instructions. Like, don't get dinged because you didn't have the right word count and stuff like that. So very annoying, but you have to do it. Otherwise, you will just waste a bunch of time. Okay, so what does this mean? I'm going to walk through how you can actually use ChatGPT to avoid these pitfalls. And this is something you can do, on your own pretty much immediately after this. It's funny, we got a few questions about EU grants. This example is actually from the EIC Accelerator, which is like the European version of the SBIR program. I'd say this applies to any of them. Typically, they have some kind of section that talks about scope. In US federal grants, it's typically just like in the full funding opportunity announcement, it's like over 100 pages long, but basically scroll through it or search for scope or description or something like that. Then you can copy paste all of this, paste it into ChatGPT, and have some kind of prompt basically like this, which is like, here's some important context. Or sorry, this is Innovate UK, not EIC Accelerator, but here's some important context about the funding opportunity that I want to apply to. Please understand this. So I'm telling it the context about what they're looking for. And then that lets me ask, basically, do I fit for this? Here, yeah, so I could say like my company, I made up a company named Coralex, is like using Olivine. And then I can ask it basically, do I qualify for this? Is this something that would fit based on what you know about the program and about me? And know that you need to basically tell it everything, right? You need to tell it the background, the history of the proposal, and the more information you can give, the better. But that's just like one quick way of checking, because something we hear a lot is that, people think they qualify, they write the full application, and then they land on like page, I don't know, 82, and then they realize that they're not even a good fit. So the sooner you can kind of run these these checks, they're like a good sanity check to make sure you're not wasting time. The second one, I'm kind of continuing in the prompting from the first one, where I'm pretty much saying, I'm working on this grant, I just gave it context, and I want to ask a question, right? Like, your idea, your innovation, why is it game changing? And I tell it what to talk about in the answer. I tell it the word limit and all these other things. So one thing to know about like prompting effectively is that you want to be as explicit as possible. It's kind of like, if you're going through grant writing kind of in the standard way, you create an outline, and you write bullet points about what you want to include in every paragraph. That's pretty much work you're going to have to do anyway. Like, you have to think about what you're proposing to the government. That's your job. But you shouldn't have to waste a lot of time in turning it from, very concrete ideas into a narrative form. The other thing I kind of want to touch on is this, how do I even put this? This idea around feeding the answer kind of back into itself. It's kind of like the writing process you would go through if you had an editor, or if you were writing a first draft and then you put on your editor hat and then you review it again, or you write something, then you wake up the next day and you read it again. ChatGPT is actually decent at this. You basically tell it, and in this case, I just asked it, based on your knowledge of like the scope that I described in the prompt above, is it a good fit, right? Like, and then you can also, in this section, I show an example, like, imagine you're a critical reviewer, like what is not in scope. And the reason I ask critical reviewer is otherwise it ends up being too nice. You'll notice that it tries to tell you things that you want to hear. So if you're telling it, what, like, play devil's advocate, what is possibly wrong with this? What are they going to pull out? Where am I lacking detail? And suddenly it can actually help flag those things and provide more clarity. And this kind of falls into John's earlier question around like reviewing. It's like be a reviewer, like English is my second language. Where does this sound funky grammatically? Can you make those changes? And then one step beyond that is actually pulling in the assessment criteria. Typically, like federal, state, and even like local grants will tell you exactly how they're scoring the opportunities. What I did here is quite literally just copy paste these in and paste them here, and then tell it, this is my idea, this is my answer, this is the scoring. What would you score and why? And then asking it to like cycle around that again, and provide me with like a better answer. And if you're not using ChatGPT for this is like what you should be doing by hand anyway. And it's interesting to see that it's able to kind of pick up on what's lacking, and actually support you in this process. Yeah, so here I'm just like feeding it back into itself. And then, yeah, last but not least, like definitely review. This is one example I like to show that I was kind of playing with. So I basically said, my company is using olivine in coastal carbon capture to increase alkalinity. I have 400 words. Who's in the project team? I didn't tell it any names on my team, and it just makes up these teams. It's a cool team. Like, I wish I had this team. But in this case, it just made all this up, right? So I would need to kind of go through this and say, okay, this is the structure that I want to use in my answer, but I pretty much need to like replace all the gaps. So it pretty much gave me a template for something, which, again, the team question might not be the most useful one to throw in here, but review everything to the T, because yeah, this happens. Okay, yeah, so to summarize what we went through, context you provide is everything. If I had talked about my team, it would have been able to answer that. Be explicit, like super, super detailed about what you want in your answer, the format, the tone. The more detail you can provide, the higher the quality will be. And then you're the expert, like fact check literally everything, because it's just generating things that you want to hear, basically.
Helena, we have a question in the chat real quick, asking from Paris to, is this the paid version of the GPT that you used there, and have to combine several AI to make sure of the feedback?
Good question. So this was just on the free version. I wanted to walk through something that anyone could use without any barriers. And there's a lot of like back and forth. Often you'll have to like start a new chat over if it gets confused or goes down the wrong thread. But I'd say it's like still worth doing if you can, isolate parts of your data that aren't the most sensitive, because otherwise, you're not using all the tools available to you. It's just other people will be, and they'll be moving faster. And, as a founder, you have to be resourceful and scrappy. And that's like one way of doing it. I have to combine several AI to make sure of the feedback. I'm not sure what you mean by that. The second part of the question.
Feel free to clarify, Paris, and also if you want to come off mute.
Thanks, Leighton. Yes, of course. So, different. I use KPI, and so to make sure what I'm receiving is correct information, and of course, your own input is the most important part. But I wasn't sure because the knowledge is that is available on the free version is 2021. So yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't use it for like real world data, if that makes sense, right? Like, and that might feel limiting, but for the bulk of a lot of this, like you are putting together a proposal for like a project you've already kind of scoped. So if you know what you're applying for, it's a matter of like getting your ideas on paper and making it and hitting all the boxes that they want to answer. If you need like a research tool to find new scientific literature, like I would not use ChatGPT for that. Bing AI might be better there, or Bard, because they access the internet and can help you find sources. Yeah, there I would kind of like play around. Of course. Yeah, of course, the real data finding is another research I do myself, but I saw that you asked the chat about the scope, if, and you asked the recommendation. I wasn't sure I could ask that from the free version, but that was interesting.
Yeah, so let me
make sure that's super clear. So to check if I was in scope, this was in the same chat thread as this one, where I had pasted in the information about the scope. And I'd say even for models that access the internet, you want to be more explicit than just saying, am I in scope for the Innovate UK grant this year? Because it doesn't have a way of priority ranking like this year's proposal from last year's proposal. It'll combine them, it'll get confused. So you really want to tell it, this is the one I'm applying for, and can you check if I qualify? And this might change on those models, in the next few months. Things are moving fast, but I would make sure that you are explicit about like, this is the scope, rather than trusting like Bard that connects to the internet. Is there a resource you recommend to find climate grant opportunities? Great question. I wish there was a comprehensive data set. We are working on one. The path that a lot of people take today is hiring consultants to do this. So typically it'll take them a bit of time to like put together a package that helps you find opportunities. The more kind of like scrappy way is searching grants.gov. You can subscribe to all sorts of notifications, and then they'll send you emails that match on certain keywords. Ends up being quite noisy. You'll get a lot of emails that aren't a good fit. There's also like various states and local like governments that have places to search through. If you happen to be a nonprofit, there's a page called Instrumental that isn't free. It's like, I think 500 a month. And it lets you like get matched to grant opportunities, but those are only for like nonprofit grants. In a few months, we'll be releasing our own that helps match based on like your documents. It'll just kind of feed you opportunities that are scoped and qualified. And then we also kind of help with the filling out of the full application. But that's not live yet.
We also have another question from Stephen about how do you prompt ChatGPT to use more proposal appropriate language? I use it all the time for proposal and grant writing, but it still gives away way too many adjectives and flowery language, etc.
Great question. The advice I give around prompting is like, imagine you were giving that feedback to a human. It ends up being quite similar, right? So you can see this flowery like language generated, and then you can respond to it and say, hey, this is way too flowery. I can't even say that word. Flowery. Can you make this more scientific and technical for a highly intelligent audience that understands my space? And you'll notice it's like significantly different in the generation that's outputted. You just have to tell it very explicitly, kind of like what you're looking for in the answer, and kind of go back and forth. And then you get better at that. And then you can start off the bat with this like prompt that's more specific. So in like these cases, I could have said, according to your knowledge of scope, is my product a good fit? I could have said, give me a one-word answer, right? Or I could have said, respond in bullet points and actually make recommendations about what to do best. So tell it what you want. And of course, that's not like going to work all of the time, but that should get you like, 85, 90% of the way there.
Another question. I have a question actually. In terms of the information that you feed it from your project, how much information is necessary? So I don't know if I saw, besides the kind of like the headliner of what Coral X was, is that enough, or like how much more information do you need to feed it in order to get something valuable out?
I'd say the more the better. If you only give it a little bit, like that's all it's going to be able to take and kind of regurgitate into various formats. And if you ask it to like elaborate, like it'll make stuff up. If you give it more information, it'll obviously like be able to help you more. I think the amount you want to give it really depends on like the sensitivity of your technology in something like ChatGPT. Because obviously the more is better, but if you can't share that, then at least you can get some kind of like template or something to like start working off of, and then you can copy paste it into Word or whatever other editor you're using. The alternative is that, Streamline does this in a protected way, and I'm sure other platforms do too. If you're looking for an environment where you can securely, upload IP and interact with it in a generative way, because then you don't have to, worry about what's secure and what's not.
Well, thanks. Is anything else that you had in order for presentation that was summarized it, right?
Yeah, that was it. Thanks for all the questions.
I have one more actually, if
yeah.
it's that time. I guess this is more, not so much from the tool level, but maybe more from the grant writing in general. Do you have any knowledge about, in terms of what are the usual suspects or the sections within proposals that seem to be the tougher ones where people get scored lower, or where tools like this could really help?
It's a super broad question. Like, the landscape of grants is wide.
It's a bit of an unfair one, I realize.
Yeah.
First, but I didn't know if there were trends in like certain areas that people just seem to do poorly in, more so than in other sections.
I mean, I'd say like one broad, like general theme we didn't touch on is like how to think about like the proposal itself. When, especially for like government grants, they're not looking for you to pitch your startup. Putting on your founder hat, talking to VCs, like talk about your multi-billion-dollar TAM all day long if you want. But when you're going to like public funding, they don't care about a multi-billion-dollar TAM. They care about how are you going to help society, right? Like, what communities are you working with? What academic institutions have you partnered with in getting this out? So I think a lot of people who are new to grants, coming from more of like the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem, are kind of shocked that they have to collaborate with a community benefits organization. And if you think about that, of course you do, like that makes sense. But that's the world I come from too. And I was just like it's very different, right? It's almost like a cultural shift to start going after grants, and the language should reflect that. Right? The language shouldn't be all about like, this is how I'm going to scale and like use all this to like basically capture all this information to my company. Like, no, how are you going to create value for the public? And that that's like a subtle but like super, super important thing that I see a lot of like founders fall into.
Yeah, that's true. I even think that I think most proposals I've ever written, I emphasize the TAM, SAM, SUM. So good to know.
It depends, right? Like, if you look at the SBIR program, the Small Business Innovation and Research Program, NSF phase 1, if people haven't looked at that one, that's probably going to be the first one I'd recommend to most people here. SBIR is known for helping to commercialize. So there, they do care about how is, the 250K going to help create some kind of step function in unlocking your development so that you can start charging for your product, so that you're on the path to commercialization. And that's unique to the SBIR program. A lot of other grants like don't care about you commercializing, right? They're funding R&D and kind of building up the public knowledge base. So again, it's super grant specific. So like, become an expert in like the grants you're applying for before you go after it, so that you can kind of speak to what they're looking for. Another question in the chat. If there was a novel product process, how would GPT know what to say? As for a grade level response, I was told to dumb down the article from 12 to 14-ish, because I was writing 19 to 22. I don't know what 12 to 14 versus 19 to 22 means. But in terms of like the higher level question of how does it know how to describe a novel process, it won't. You need to tell it what your novel process is, and then it can turn your bullet points into a paragraph. It can also, talk about how to just like talk in technical language, and then you go through and you modify that for your kind of given situation. But know that it's not going to come up with anything out of the box about your novel process that you're telling it.
Any other questions? How's your time? We've got some time. All right, John, go for it.
Okay, first off, that 12 to 14-ish and 19 to 22 is grade level. And so if you can put that as high school to maybe sophomore college, I was apparently talking in masters that a reviewer technically would technically go over someone's head. And then I was listening as I was trying to write the question where you said SBIR is interested in commercialization. I've done SBIR, STTR, NASA, DARPA, and everything the back when. And the thing is, yeah, granted, they'll give you the money, but I didn't like their policy on keeping the rights, claiming the rights and data so that they can give it to any government contractor to develop the product or program that you originated, and the originator has no recourse with regard nor royalties. And then they say, if you want more money, you'd better be a government contractor. But to become a government contractor, there's too many loops and hoops to jump through to become. So you're basically stepping on your own kind, and I would not recommend. I don't go to government. People can go if they have the company. I'm just me, myself, and I, and I've been struggling along for longer than you were been around from the looks of it. I mean, my first concept came up in '85, so that pretty much dates me. And I'm still a startup, still trying to find my first funds. And that's when I ask if you know of any rich single woman who's be interested in a very lucrative business proposition. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. I'd say one thing I'll add. I totally agree. Going after government funding can take a lot of time. Becoming a government contractor is full of loopholes. Like, sorry, not loopholes. Also loopholes, but mostly like hoops to jump through. The most strategic way I've seen people get access to government funding without going through those hoops is selling to the contractors, being a subcontractor. So that's like a very strategic way of going about it. Often states and local governments will have RFPs, requests for proposals from various things, and the same set of large companies go after them. You're muted, by the way. You can sell to the people who are creating those proposals. It increases your sales channel, your like sales cycle, because you don't actually have to deal with doing any of the reporting yourself. So that's something we've seen a lot of. It does take like a good amount of like business development work just to like meet the right people who are applying pretty regularly. But you can take a look at who's won grants in the past, and get to know them, and start collaborating.
Thanks, Helena. Any other general questions? Because we've got a little bit more time, but we can also wrap up early and give people back the gift of time otherwise. And if you do have other questions that come up later, then you can always check out Helena and Streamline. I'll post the link again, but yeah, it can set up some time with them to find out more. And yeah, go ahead, John.
Sorry, but when you were saying that you can work through the other contractor, or you would have to license the product that you're developing, this novel product, to them. But then, as it is in our field, to try and come up with something new, or a prototype or MVP, whatever they're talking it. I call it. I come across even a RAT, which is the riskiest assumable test. Or so anyway, it takes money to make money. I can't make the RAT or MVP without getting the money, but then I can't get the money without having the prototype or the RAT. So chicken before the egg, or it's catch-22. That's why
So this might come back to a bit about the IP sensitivity, right? And making sure that you only use ChatGPT when you're not using proprietary information that you want to make sure that you don't get out there. Helena, do you have any other suggestions around that, or?
Yeah, I mean, John, you're not alone. Like, I think a lot of people struggle with this of like, you need money to make money. You can go after grants, but you also eloquently described the challenges with that, and sharing your IP. You can go after VC funding. You can try to find angel investors, or you can figure out a way of bootstrapping. But there are, I mean, every type of capital comes with its own like strings attached, and you have to figure out what kind of capital makes the most sense for what you're working on, right? Like VC funding isn't the right model for a lot of companies. It is for others. It comes with certain like growth requirements. Grant funding isn't the right model for every company. There happens to be more grant funding now than ever before for the climate tech sector. So it makes sense to not kind of ignore it. And it's non-dilutive, even though it does require, a lot more paperwork to file and other things, but you're not giving up your company, right? And stacking that with venture funding means that, your runway is longer and you protect more of your equity for yourself and your employees.
Don't need the money, forget a place.
Awesome.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. When you applied for grants, I know some of the things you spoke about were accelerators rather than grants, but did you use a consultancy? And follow-up question, how much of a competitive advantage do you think it is?
That's a great question. I'd say it depends. My answer gonna keep being it depends. If you've never written a grant before, it can make all the difference. Once you've done one or two, assuming you have the resources to do it in-house, you can probably, have enough learnings from that process to do it yourself just as effectively. A lot of the
It's
time,
hard to get learnings from it though, because you don't get feedback. Like we've applied for a few, we got one, we didn't get two. I have no idea what the difference was.
yes. Okay. Sorry. I meant if you've done a few with a consultant.
Okay.
Process,
Right. Got you.
or at least, not be worried that it's something you're doing wrong. Like if you've won one and lost one, like that's higher odds than most people. Like you're probably working on something very cool and very impactful. And the other, like one of them was a fluke, right? So I would just keep applying and figure out very strategic ways of like not having it take up all your time. And like basically be able to repurpose what you've applied for with one. And that's like exactly kind of the first product we built with Streamline. It's like helping you use your past grants to apply to future ones. So you can kind of like make your process a lot faster. And you can do this in other ways, just like have like a Word document running with all your past answers and then copy snippets over to like save yourself time. In terms of using grant consultants, like it's possible, it's expensive. Often, you want to, of course, do your like due diligence on who you're working with and look at their past successes. What is good is that typically they have a very aligned like fee structure. So they only take clients on that they think they can help. They're not going to like charge you an arm and a leg if they don't think that you're going to win some grants with them. So that's a plus. The minus is that it is just expensive, which if you're super early stage might not make sense. If you're later stage, maybe bring someone on in-house, maybe keep outsourcing it. It's hard to say without knowing like everything about you and your company.
That was a good answer though. Thank you.
And without being too salesy, maybe Streamline can help. So
yeah, we can help.
no, but Helena, also thank you so much. This has been really insightful and helpful, even with or without Streamline. We really value you sharing your insights and knowledge on this. I know hopefully my proposal writing is going to become a lot easier now based on what you've shared. Hopefully that's the same for others. But yeah, people feel free to get in touch with Helena and Streamline. And unless there's anything else, we can get wrapped up and join the Climate Techies community as well. We're Forward VC, so we all believe around collaboration can really make the difference in the climate ecosystem. So more partners like Streamline are always really helpful, that really can help us get there. But feel free to join our community and connect with others that are on a similar mission, so we can do it together, which makes it hopefully easier. But on that note, thanks everyone, and thanks so much, Helena. And until next time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.